Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. Let's take you to a developing story making headlines further afield. A New York jury has heard details of an alleged scheme to suppress negative stories about Donald Trump ahead of the 2016 presidential election. Now, Donald Trump's hush money trial is back in session on Thursday, with former newspaper publisher David Pecker taking to the stand. Trump is accused of falsifying business records and could face jail time. He's pleaded not guilty to 34 criminal charges. Right, let's expand now and get some reaction. SABC News correspondent Sally Patterson joins us now to discuss this further. Sally, very good evening to you once again. We know that as former President Donald Trump faces day 7 of his criminal trial today, what are some of the latest developments coming up? I mean, we understand that Trump and his attorneys have now filed a motion requesting a new trial in the case.
Non-stop here in New York. That trial has been just taking over interest here. People have been continuing to gather outside the courthouse in downtown Manhattan to watch as the media continues to feed on that ongoing story. Now, it's no surprise that Trump isn't happy with the course of the case. He didn't really want it to happen in the first place, of course, but he's also really not pleased to be here. He'd much rather be over in Washington, D.C., where he's facing other legal challenges. But he has been at court on Thursday. The judge in this case, Juan Merchan, said he has to be here. This is a criminal case. He is a defendant in this trial. He said you have to be here for every day that the case is ongoing. Trump had asked, for example, to be removed for personal reasons and also in some of these other court cases going on, but the Trump said no. On Thursday, what we've seen is a continuation of that evidence by the first witness in this case, David Pecker. He was the publisher of the National Enquirer in the lead up to the 2016 presidential election. And what the jury's been hearing on Thursday and indeed throughout this week is David Pecker's role in this alleged scheme. What the prosecution alleges here is that David Pecker was part of a campaign to try and suppress negative stories about Donald Trump, who was running to be president of the United States at the time. And Pecker basically said in his testimony that he had 3 main goals. 1, he wanted to publish positive stories about the former president. 2, he wanted to suppress negative stories about the former president. And 3, he wanted to be his eyes and ears on the ground. And what that basically looked like was finding potentially negative or scandalous stories coming out about Donald Trump, buying them, paying for the rights to those stories, and then squashing them, making sure that they never saw the light of day.
What moves are expected from the judge on Trump's alleged gag order violations? I understand that's also something that came up.
Well, Trump has repeatedly says that this gag order that was imposed on him by the judge is unconstitutional and unfair. That's language that we've seen time and time again from the former president throughout this trial so far, and indeed in other court cases he's found himself in over the past few months. What he's been ordered to do by the court is he's not allowed to put on social media or speak to the press or anything like that any threats towards the judge's family, threats towards the witnesses, threats towards the jury, things that aren't often actually seen as issues in cases like this because most people aren't necessarily initiating that type of behavior. But as we've seen in the past with Donald Trump, he's put out statements, for example, on his own social media platform, Truth Social, which have been taken as intimidating or harassing towards potential witnesses and indeed family members of those involved in the case. For example, the judges or court clerks and other people involved in cases he's faced. So this gag order basically says he's not allowed to do that, although the judge himself isn't involved in that gag order specifically. Donald Trump was out on the campaign trail earlier and he once again rallied against this gag order, saying it was unconstitutional, unfair, and it meant that he wasn't allowed to respond to attacks on him.
We understand he made a surprise visit to a bunch of people at a construction site in Manhattan. How was he received?
That's right. He was met with chants, songs, people wearing Make America Great Again red hats, which I'm sure you'll remember from the previous election. there was a real sense of jubilation really at this event that Donald Trump attended on Thursday. He had to be there before court began because, as I say, he has to be in court when it is sitting. But he's trying to find those bits of time before court, after court, to go out and campaign. He is, of course, running to be president again at the end of this year in November's presidential election. So he's having to try and find those times to go out and speak to the public, to speak to would-be voters and make sure that they're on side. He went around shaking hands, speaking to people at this construction site, making statements to the press as well about the cases that he's facing around the country. We know that there is continuing to be a major amount of support for Donald Trump, both here in New York, but actually around the country as well. Many people have also been using the language that Donald Trump himself has used, which is that this is a political move by Donald Trump's opponents to try and keep him out of the White House. They say that this is politically motivated. They've called it a witch hunt in the past. And what we've seen is when Donald Trump has found himself inside courtrooms in the past, his approval ratings have actually gone up as more and more people jump on that bandwagon, potentially getting themselves involved in conspiracy theories as well about why this court case and others have come about. Donald Trump and President Joe Biden are really neck on neck at the moment. So there's going to be very close eyes over the coming days, weeks and months about how this case and others impacts both President Joe Biden, but also Trump's own ability and likelihood of getting back into the White House at the end of the year.
Very well, Sally Patterson. Let's leave it there for now. Thank you for your time, giving us an update of the latest developments coming out of that corruption trial around former US President Donald Trump.